Oops, better turn off the music. Hey Google, stop. Hello everybody. We're going to give it here a minute to make sure that we are live. Okay, hello everybody. Konnichiwa. Hola. Привет. Marhaba. Shalom. Wherever you might be, thank you very much for joining us today. Today is the 1st of December, Tuesday, or the 2nd of December, wherever you might be, Wednesday. And we're coming with you today with an interview and regarding a pretty neat podcast app. Hello, Marco.
Hello, Nimer. How are you, my friend?
Well, if I sound very strange, my throat doesn't like me very much, so I apologize for that. We will try to talk not so much so that you don't have to be annoyed by my crazy voice.
Well, before we go into the interview, Nimer, I'll just throw out to our listeners that if you haven't checked out our website, you should do so, because we have a new little link that's popped up near the top there, which is Support Blind Tech Guys. So for anybody that doesn't know, it does cost a little bit of money each month to bring this podcast to you. Now, we're not expecting to get rich by any means, but a little bit of support in terms of monetary donation, if you'd like to help us out, in order to keep the podcast going, would be great. Check out blindtechguys.com. Have a look at the link there. That'll take you through to PodFan. And, would really appreciate it if you considered donating some cashola.
Definitely. And also, if you are a developer that wishes to come on our podcast to discuss your app, or if you would like to see a particular developer come on, please let us know, as we do enjoy doing these kinds of interviews. And we do enjoy having developers on and learning about their apps and that kind of thing and sharing that with you all. So I think this is a wonderful thing. And having said all that, I'm going to go ahead and begin this pre-recording of the AntennaPod podcast demo. And we'll see you guys at the end. Hello there, mystery guest.
Hello, yes, I'm Koen.
You just muted it.
No, I didn't mute it, but let me see what's going on here.
So whilst Nimmer goes and sorts out what's going on here, not getting any audio from the interview at the moment, Nimmer, we might just start that up again, just so that you know what's going on there, listeners, and we will be back very, very shortly with our interview with the AntennaPod podcast app team.
Hello there, mystery guest.
Hello, yes, I'm Koen Glotsbach, and actually I'm not a developer, but I work like as a volunteer. I contribute to the AntennaPod project, yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, there we go. Well, welcome, and we're very glad to have you here. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, Koen, can
so,
I just ask you a little bit about AntennaPod? So, there's been a bit of talk in the blindness community, especially on a couple of Android lists that I'm on, about AntennaPod. So, exactly what is AntennaPod? We all, or some of us, know that it's open source software. If we can quickly run what the app's all about and what you do in terms of making it accessible.
Right, sure, of course. So, well, as most of your listeners probably know, AntennaPod is a podcasting app, so you retrieve all the episodes and can listen to them from there. And AntennaPod is open source indeed. So this means that it's developed by volunteers from all over the world who provide pieces of code and translations and designs, etc. An important aspect, I think, of AntennaPod is that it respects your privacy. So the code behind the app is public, so you can actually check yourself that we're not collecting any data. And related to that is that the app itself is ad free. And so the project was launched by Daniel in 2011, and there have been some maintainers, some lead developers in the meantime, and since around 2019-ish, it's Hans-Peter Lehmann who's playing a main role, and it's been installed on 180,000 active devices, so that's quite a nice reach. And in terms of accessibility, I think many of our community members find this important, and this also shows from the fact that we have a lot of users from the blind community, as you say, and yeah, this is important to me personally as well. And we received a comment from a blind user who said that AntennaPod is better usable than some of the other apps out there, which made Hans-Peter, so the current main developer, download Talkback. And yeah, basically he was using AntennaPod with his eyes closed, using Talkback, and yeah, he said that it made him realize that it's even more challenging than he expected to use AntennaPod with your eyes closed. So in version 2.0, we improved quite a few things in different areas like Talkback, and the touch areas like how big button spaces are, color contrast, and audio settings. To highlight maybe just two, so that would be Talkback. There's been major improvements, mainly done by Hans-Peter. So firstly, if you hover an item, or I don't know how that works exactly, but if you activate an item in the queue, an episode, it pronounces the dates and the duration and the position much more smoothly than it did before. So that's been improved greatly. And also something that we've done recently is trying to make the contrast compliant with web content accessibility guidelines, and then specifically the AA standards. That's kind of what we aim for. And before that was kind of a struggle because we have a light and a dark theme, and there's a lot of different colors and shades which make contrast a difficult thing. Now I know this is not relevant for fully blind users, but I still want to highlight it because it's related to accessibility. And now since we've launched under a new brand, we made it possible to increase that contrast.
Well, I have to say that one thing that I have found from using AntennaPod over other podcast providers, such as, let's say, for example, Podcast Addict, which is another one that's very much used by the blind community, is that a lot of things do come up very nicely labeled in the sense of that you can get information easily. So if you wanted to know how long a file was, the time duration, the megabytes that a file is, etc., all that sort of information is very easily available and ready for the user to find. So I do like that.
Yeah, I mean that's indeed some of the changes that we've made to make that more accessible. But of course, if there's any improvements that you think can be made to make the app even more accessible, we're very happy to hear about that. We have quite some active community members on our forum and on GitHub as well, where kind of the development of the app is happening. Basically, we've had recently some feedback, so we're making changes there. But we've also now created a label on GitHub for new issues that are created to identify like all the accessibility items, so that we can more easily identify them and follow up on that.
Now, in terms of it being open accessible, which is fantastic, is the app maintained on a regular basis? I know that some listeners will be concerned about that sort of thing. Is it maintained on a regular basis, and is it updated regularly?
Yes, it is. At least in the sense that we are working on it almost every day. Like I said, we're all volunteers. I'm doing this beside my like full-time job in Brussels, where I live, and Hans Peter is working on his thesis, which is taking a lot of time as well.
Wow.
But we managed to work on AntennaPod at the same time with great pleasure as well. And of course, sometimes it is a challenge to release new versions, because you want to round things up and have something to bring something new to bring to the table, so to say. But there's been some discussions in the forum going on about like how often we should release. But yeah, we're trying to shorten the cycle and release a bit more often. But yeah, for sure, it's still an active development. So that shouldn't be any cause for concern.
So, of course, on the podcast here, we do focus a lot on accessibility, but I have to ask, there are a lot of podcast clients, as you know, and a lot of different ways of consuming content. Why should a user, blind or not, why should they choose AntennaPod, or what does AntennaPod bring to the table that may be better than other apps, accessibility or otherwise?
Right. So I hope we're doing good in terms of accessibility, but I let you judge on that. But one of the other important aspects, like I mentioned, is that we really are like open source. We're respecting your privacy, and this also translates in the fact that the app itself is ad free. So there's no ads in the app, and of course, if there's ads in the podcasts, that money fully goes to the creators. But yeah, no ads in our app. We support the open source philosophy. And also, one thing that is important for us is like simplicity of the app, so that it's easy to use. There's no steep learning curve, because there's so many things possible with podcasting apps. You can automate a lot, you can set a lot of preferences, and there's a lot of customizability in AntennaPod already, but still we get a lot of requests for even more options. And while we try to be as customizable as possible, we also find it important to not introduce too many settings and options for the user, so that they then in a way get overwhelmed. So that is another important aspect, that we want to be user friendly. And if we're not good at that at any point, we are very eager to hear from our users how we can improve that.
In terms of features, I guess just AntennaPod, just for listening users, does it support a lot of the common features? I know you talked about some things that you don't want to add too many options, but such things as, I don't know, chapter markers, such things as downloading episodes or not downloading them automatically, that kind of thing.
Right, yeah. So I think we support many of the more desired features, like you can set the speed of the playback. When downloading episodes, you can automate that quite extensively. You can set up filters based on search terms. You can select, at least in previous versions, but on later Android version, this is a bit more tricky. You can select which Wi-Fi networks you want to download on, and for example, you can set the frequency of refreshing feeds. And chapter marks are supported as well by AntennaPod. Now, I know this is particularly interesting, or like well known in Germany. A lot of the German podcasts make use of chapter marks, and I have seen that your podcast as well makes use of
Well,
chapter
that's
marks.
interesting that you're talking about that, Koen, because I was actually wondering, and I know that I've had a couple of inquiries from listeners about chapter markers. Is that actually supported? Because I was under the impression it wasn't.
It definitely is supported, but the fact that you couldn't find it or get it to work indicates that we have an issue with either discoverability or accessibility. So I can explain you where it is. So if you open like start playing a podcast and you open the main player, because we have like a mini player at the bottom, and if you tap on it, like there's a full screen player. Then if you swipe to the left, you open the podcast's notes, the show notes, and if there are chapter marks, if you then swipe left again, then you'll have a list of the chapters with an indication of the duration and the starting time.
Ah, okay. So you have to actually do it in the actual episode notes there. I understand what you mean. Just a thought, I think, from a few of our listeners and myself as well. Maybe try and see if you can make that as part of your previous and next buttons whilst an episode is playing, if you get my drift. So that if there are chapter
Right.
markers, instead of going to the next episode, it would go to the next chapter. Or you could set it up that way. Maybe have a setting where you could set that up to work.
Right. That's definitely something to consider. The fact that you didn't notice this at first use, means that we can improve there.
I guess for our listeners that don't know what open source software is, what is open source software?
So open source means literally that the source is open, that you can access the source, and the source being that the code that makes up the app. And there is apart from this, the code behind the app being available and accessible to everybody. It's also related, I think, in my opinion, to some kind of philosophy where you collaborate together to improve the software that we use in our daily lives, where you are accountable to what you put in your software, that you are not secretly putting in methods to collect data, for example, and that you're open to contributions from a lot of different people, where you together, at least in our project, together work on a common goal and have discussions on how to reach that goal. And we really try to stand by those principles. And the forum that we have, that I already mentioned before, is something recent, but it's been recently set up, but it's really great to see some interesting discussions happening there about how do we want AntennaPod to be positioned vis-a-vis, for example, ads in podcasts. Because it is possible, it would theoretically be possible to skip ads automatically, to have a feature for this in the app, but there's been discussions like, how does AntennaPod position itself in the podcasting ecosystem, for example.
Yeah, I think that's a very it's an interesting discussion, because obviously ads are put into podcasts so that the podcaster can make a little bit of money, hopefully. And I think the ability of skipping that, I'm not so sure that'll go down well with some people.
Yeah, absolutely. I must say though that especially in Germany, but because there's a lot of podcasting going on there for a longer time already, but I'm sure this was the case in other countries as well. Podcasting was based on an economic model related to donations. So there's podcasters who can live from donations that they receive from listeners of their creative work, and that's something that is very particular of the open ecosystem that podcasting is. And this is also something that we want to maintain as AntennaPod, because there are players like Google Podcasts or particularly Spotify who are entering this ecosystem and are initiating a process where the ecosystem gets more and more closed.
Yeah,
Whereas
well,
an
it's
open
becoming a lot
ecosystem,
more muddy, absolutely. And of course, for those that don't know, Spotify does own Anchor, which is of course a platform as well. So it is becoming a lot muddier.
yeah,
Yeah.
and as this ecosystem is getting more and more close, the role of AntennaPod and other open ecosystem apps will be more and more limited. So it's very important for us that RSS feeds are public, that users can host podcasters can host their content anywhere, and that listeners can use those RSS feeds to listen that content, to hear that content in any location or app or whatever they like. There's an interesting initiative in this respect. It's called the Podcast Index, which really aims to build a global database with all the podcasts that are out there without central gatekeepers, and to have a database maintained by the global podcasting community. And we recently developed support for this podcast index as well. And there's a lot of other interesting things that could be done, which would be very cool, like social recommendations and also monetary appreciation of podcasters in an automatic way, like it existed before with Flatter, which unfortunately stopped supporting podcasts. But there's a lot of room for developments in the open ecosystem atmosphere, which we hopefully will tap into also in the coming future.
Well, I'll tell you, whoever's looking after that podcast index will have a heck of a job on their hands. There's millions of podcasts out there, so it would take a fair bit of upkeep, I'd imagine.
Yeah, they are really having an interesting approach to keeping that podcast index up to date, working with different partners and using crawling as well. So yeah, that is an interesting approach, but actually it solves one of the bigger problems that AntennaPod has had recently, which is, if you search for a French podcast from France Culture, not all the podcasts showed up, and there was an issue with iTunes not providing the URLs of these podcasts, so you would have them in your search overview, but you couldn't actually subscribe to them. And by putting the database in the hands of the podcasting community, apps like AntennaPod and other apps as well will be assured of good quality input for their search results.
As things currently stand, where does AntennaPod get its list of podcasts from?
So, like I said, we used to base that off of iTunes virtually exclusively. We also support the German feed.de and gpodder.net. But those sources are limited in their scope, and we have recently tapped into these resource of the podcast index, which is massive already but still growing. So yes, that's where we're getting our data from. And actually in the app itself, in the add podcast screen, you can also choose where you want to search. So if you want to search specifically in feed.de or in the podcast index, that's possible.
So can you tell us a little bit about the history of accessibility within AntennaPod and where you think that you stand now? I know that you're open to accessibility feedback, but just for listeners, and I think we have a couple of clips to play too. If you can just tell us a little bit about that accessibility and where you are and where you're going.
So I believe that as a non-developer, I cannot be 100% sure about this because I can't interpret the code that is behind what you see in what you have on your phone. But if I understood correctly, the app has always been relatively accessible. And like I said before, the comment from the blind user says that even before the update that we made recently, the version 2, the app was already quite usable. It remains a priority for us to improve things further.
Excellent. I guess there's a final question from me, and I'm sure that some listeners will be interested to know, have you got any upcoming features or updates that you'd like to announce to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we're sparse with new features, but we certainly definitely have improvements in the works. So right now what is in beta is our local feeds, which means that you can add actually a folder that is on your phone, like the downloads folder, and add it as a podcast. And then the files that are in the folder will show up as episodes. And this has actually been the most upvoted issue that we had on GitHub, so it's a very popular request. And it took quite some work to get that done, but it is coming soon. And another thing that we're working on, or we started working on, are tags for podcasts. So we have the basic UI defined, and now we need to do the coding. And with those tags, you will be able to organize your podcasts more easily. There are some users who chipped in to us on our with us on our forum and GitHub channels, saying that they have like 50 or so podcasts that they are subscribed to, and yeah, organizing them through tags will be very helpful
Yep,
to
and I
them.
would definitely be one of those that would love that feature as well.
Right. So we started to work on that, but help is very welcome there. There's a quite concrete checklist with relatively easy tasks. If you're into Android app development in Java, then do chip in on GitHub and check it out. We are really looking for support there.
Well, I can guarantee you that if you added that feature and you also added the ability to skip chapters, as I suggested earlier, I would be a convert 100% from Podcast Addict. So there you go. You might gain another full-time
Great.
user if you can get those happening.
Yeah, you mentioned the betas.
Yeah.
Is that something that users can join through Google Play Store, or how does somebody go join that beta to provide feedback on these features?
Right. So yeah, we are actually also on F-Droid. So that's another
Okay.
another application ecosystem
Yes. Yep,
apart
yep.
from Google Play Store. But there we don't have the beta. So there the betas are only on Google Play. And if you install the app, if you go to the AntennaPod listing in Google Play, a bit down the bottom of the screen, there should be a button that
There is.
allows you
I've joined
to.
it. Yeah, to join the beta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to join the beta, and then you can receive features, more or earlier than other users, and that's very valuable for us, especially from your community, because when we develop new features, of course, accessibility is in our minds, but putting new features and changes in the app out to users will make sure that we get the feedback and that it reaches us when some change has a negative impact on accessibility. So yeah, joining the beta is very, very helpful for us.
Yep, and for all users, this is just a standard Android way of joining just about any app beta that exists. So it's a good thing. Now, how does somebody go on providing feedback to you on accessibility? What's the best way to do that?
I think the best way to do that is to chip in on our forum if it's a more generic comment, or if it's something very specific, very concrete. Everybody is very welcome to create an issue on GitHub, the development platform.
And I guess there's a final question from myself. Now, this app is only available on Android at this point in time. Is there any plans, because we do have a number of iOS listeners, is there any plans of the app being brought out on the iOS platform, or is it primarily an Android app for now?
It is primarily an Android app for now, and I suspect that it will be like this for the foreseeable future.
Um,
It wouldn't be really open source on iOS.
No, well,
would it?
that's what I was. But we've got to include our iOS friends in here, so just to say what
Yeah, no,
what
but
you guys are planning.
we've got a lot of things that we would love to improve and implement in the app itself. We're currently also working on a new website to engage like more people in our community and have a place where we can share blogs and our insights from our work on AntennaPod. So there's plenty of things for us to tackle before we delve into an app for iOS.
Is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know? I think this has been a really great interview.
In general, I'm very happy to have been invited here, and yeah, any feedback is very welcome. We really appreciate to be contributing to the open podcasting ecosystem. We hope to be able to do that in the future as well. So yeah, any help from any of your listeners in achieving that goal, in contributing to that open ecosystem and delivering a great experiences podcasting experience for any of the users is very much appreciated.
Koen, do you want to give our listeners the website URL where they can pop along and check out your product?
Yeah, that will be antennapod.org.
Well, I have to say that I was suggested to try your app and perhaps see if I could get you onto the show. And I must say that out of any of the apps that I've tried, and I've tried a lot of podcast apps, yours is definitely well on the way to being very, very accessible and very successful. So I really do appreciate you coming onto the show, Koen. And please feel free to come back if there's any future updates that you'd like to provide for us. You're always welcome.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and if there is anything, we'll certainly chip in.
Yes, thank you so much. And just for our listeners, this has been an interview with Koen about the app AntennaPod. Thank you, everyone. All right, everybody. Well, that was a demo, or that was a interview regarding the AntennaPod. Now, I'm going to demonstrate a couple of things here, and I'm going to go a little bit off the playbook. Even Marco doesn't even know this. Hey, very good.
Very good.
Very good. We did talk about joining a beta of AntennaPod. I'm going to demonstrate that. And then I'm also going to demonstrate a little bit about the app. I'm just going to go open up the app and take you a little bit through the app, not spend very much time on it, but that's what we'll do here. So, very good, very bad. Now I have Google Play Store open, and I have the AntennaPod app installed. And if you tell me this is too slow, listeners, I don't know what to tell you, so I'm very sorry.
Ad suggested for open button on AntennaPod.
All right, so I have AntennaPod. Now, in order to join the beta, I'm going to scroll way up
Was this
with 2 fingers, and at the very bottom,
Google? Try new features before they're officially released and give your feedback to the developer. Join the beta heading. Join button.
there's a join button, so I'm going to tap on this join button.
Join beta program. Because features are in development, beta versions may be cancel. Join button. Play
There we go.
Store. Leave button.
So I have joined the beta. Now what will happen is, in a few minutes, I should get an update to the app that will be available, and that will upgrade me to the beta version. But in this case, I'm not gonna update quite yet to the beta. I'm gonna open the regular app so you can kind of take a look at what the regular app looks like.
Open beta sign up open button.
There we go.
AntennaPod. Menu.
So it brings me to Talkback automatically puts focus to a menu. Let's explore the screen.
No next link. Episodes. Queue. 20 queue. And episodes. Subscriptions. Downloads. Playback history. Add podcast. Settings. Queue. Episode. Download. Playback. Add
All right, so that's what I have here.
settings.
Let's go into the settings.
Settings. Navigate. Setting. Search. Search. Edit box.
So I can search the settings.
User interface. Appearance. Subscription order. Lock screen. Playback. Headphone controls. Skip intervals. Queue. Network. Update interval. Download controls. Mobile data. Synchronization. Synchronize with other devices using gpotter.net. Storage. Episode auto delete. Import. Export. Statistics. Project. Heading. Frequently asked questions. User forum. Report bug. About.
So that's what's in the settings. Now the settings has quite a number of options, and I'm not going to go through all those options, but as you see, they're all kind of labeled or put into menus. So let's go,
Playback.
for example,
Headphone. User interface.
user interface. Let's just go through that one, and you can explore the rest on your own.
No next link. Appearance. Heading. User. Appearance. Select theme. Change the appearance of AntennaPod.
So I can select the theme. As he talked about, there is light and dark.
Set navigation drawer items. Change which items appear in the navigation drawer.
Navigation drawer.
Set subscription order. Change the order of your subscriptions.
All very good.
Set subscription counter. Change the information displayed by the subscription counter. Use episode cover. Use the episode. External elements. Heading. Persistent playback controls. Keep notification and lock screen controls when playback is paused. Set lock screen buttons. Change the playback buttons on the lock screen. Set lock screen background. Set the lock screen background to the... Back.
All right, so
button,
as you notice, there's
navigation
quite a
bar.
lot of configuration options. Again, I'm not going to keep going through them all, but there's a lot of configuration options that you can choose exactly how you want the app to be laid out. Let's go to figure out how to add a podcast, shall we?
AntennaPod. Settings. Q.
All right, let's go to where it
download.
says
Playback history.
add a podcast. There we go.
Does the Joe Rogan search podcast? Edit box.
I'm going to search the
Showing
podcast.
English
There are
US
some
Dvorak
recommended
keyboard.
ones, but I'm going to search for Blind Tech Guys, since that one is not a recommended podcast.
B. L. I. N. H. Delete. D. Space. Space. T. O. E. C. G. H. Space. G. E. U. Y. S. S.
Blind Tech Guys.
Search.
Search.
Blind Tech Guys. Edit box. Search podcast. Blind Bargains Audio. Featuring the BB cast. Blind Tech Guys. Nimer Jaber. Warren Carr. Marco Corralejo.
Oh, very good. So I'm going to
Add
tap
podcast.
on that.
Blind Tech Guys. Nimer Jaber. Warren Carr. Subscribe button.
I'm going to subscribe.
Downloading podcast data. One download left. AntennaPod. Open menu button.
And I am subscribed.
Download. Google undergoes a faith download. Strap, the world's first total replacement of the white cane for the blind. New, November 29th, 2020. 122 megabytes. Duration, 1 hour 24 minutes.
And just before you go on, Nimrod, that's one of the great things that I really, really like about this particular player is it tells you everything up front. You don't have to go and search around. It's really good like that.
That's right.
Every bit of information that you could ever want, the megabytes, the length, it's all there right in front of you.
So now I'm going to tap on this, double tap on this app, on this Strap podcast. This is our podcast, so we won't get dinged for copyright, hopefully. Now, here's what we got. I just tapped on it.
Page, Strap, the world's first total replacement of the white cane for the blind. 1 hour 24 minutes. November 29th, 2020. Web view.
And we're in a web view.
Open podcast button. Stream. Download.
I can open it, stream, download.
Web view. Thanks for tuning into episode 6. Reliance Jio to off. Realme 8, iPhone,
And of course we've
Motorola
got-
Moto G5G with triple rear camera setup to launch in India on the 30th of November. Link.
Of
And the
course,
other
we've
good thing
got
here is
the
it
news
does-
items, and it
It
supports
does actually
HTML.
display the HTML, yeah, which is
That's
cool.
right.
iPhone, Apple, main, bullet.
Let's go through the description. It
bullet,
shows this
bullet,
entire
twit,
description.
bullet,
It
email
shows the
them with
list.
Marco, Bitwarden, and one pack. Listen, we conclude bullet to get bullet. You, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Telegram, support, HTTPS, no next default.
All right, so
Or
we've
you
reached
can
the bottom.
HTTPS
Now I'm going to
or
swipe to
join
the
our
left
mailing
with
list
two
by
fingers.
sending a
And let's see what happens.
Pay, what's Google Pay launching? Plex, bank accounts with Zoom apps. Amazon Music now has Marco. How valuable is WCAG? How do companies locate individuals to hire who are trained in
All right, so it seems like every time I
Google Pay
swipe
gets a huge
left or right, it switches between podcasts.
Conclusion.
Now it doesn't seem to tell you what podcast is, unfortunately, that you've swiped to. But
Page, strapped to blindtechguyspodcast at gmail.com. Link. You can find and interact with. We received several listen.
that
You
is
can find
such as life.
Facebook,
Now let's see if we can find the table of contents
support
that they
navigate,
mentioned
visit
here.
web, more option, page, open podcast, button, stream, download, web view, open podcast, button,
Do we have to go to open podcast?
Yeah, I
Let's see.
think we do, yeah.
navigate,
We're gonna go
search, filter,
It's pretty hidden, so
refresh.
I haven't
More
ever
options.
found it actually.
Blind Tech
Yeah,
Guys.
this is what I was
Nimer
asking him
Jaber,
earlier.
show information,
So-
show podcast settings, button, strap, the world, download. Google undergoes a
You might have to download it first, and then it
Strap,
might
the
appear.
world
Maybe. I wouldn't think so, but maybe.
Page, Reliance Jio to offer odd subscription. Thanks
So
I've
it
never
shows
managed
all
to
our
find
news
this.
items, but I've never managed to find
Page,
chapter
iPhone,
markers.
Motorola,
So if it
Moto G.
exists, it does seem to be
Slow. Page. Strap.
an
Redmi Note
accessibility
9 Pro
challenge.
5G. Redmi Note 9 5. Motorola Moto G5. Realme. Samp Recents. Button. Redmi Note 9 Pro. Page.
See if it's
Well,
right
let's-
up the
The
top
world's
or
first
something. I
total
don't know.
replacement of the
I've
white
never
cane
managed
for
to
the
find it
blind.
either. So
Menu. Downloads. Play add podcast. Play downloads. Subscribe. Add Blind Tech
Kick me
Guys.
out.
1.
Let's go back into it here.
Show it. Strap. The world's stream. Thanks for tuning into what's Reliance. Stream. Open
that's
podcast
the
page.
description
Strap.
again.
The world's
Now,
first
where it
total
says page,
replacement
let's
of
see
the
if
white
I
cane
swipe
for the
left
blind.
here, what happens.
Stream. Welcome to what's Google Pay gets a huge overhaul with
Nope,
stream.
it takes me to the next podcast.
Pay download. Stream.
All right, let's hit stream.
AntennaPod.
So now we're playing the podcast.
Download. Pause button. Media player. Strap. The
Now I'm
world's
going to
first total
expand the media
replacement of the
player.
white cane.
There we go. Now the media player is expanded, and I have at the bottom
Playback speeds. Rewind.
playback
Pause,
speed,
button.
rewind, pause,
Fast forward. Skip episode. Button.
skip episode.
Play 1 hour 24.
It would be great if they had a
1%.
skip chapter
0 hour
there.
Strap. The blind tech
And that's
guide.
what I was
Switch
suggesting
pages.
in
More
our
options.
interview.
Button. Switch pages.
Now they do have a switch pages. Let's see what's in here. I'm going to tap on that.
0 hours 0 1 hour playback rewind. Facts.
Didn't
Unlabeled.
seem to
Add
do
set
anything.
sleep time.
Maybe?
Audio controls.
Oh, now we got some options here.
More options. But
I know, I think those were already there.
Reliance G. Red Samsung Gal 0 hours
Okay, we've
0
got the
minutes
show
and
notes.
switch pages.
Let's switch pages again.
0 hours 4 minutes and TXT.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
Secondary
What was
action
that?
button.
0 hours 4 minutes or
0
something.
hours secondary action button. TXTV link. 0 hours 4 minutes and 20 secondary TXTV link.
That
0
I
hours
think is the
0
chapters
minutes and 0
essentially.
seconds. Intro.
Yeah, I
Could be.
duration.
Those are the,
Yeah,
0
these are the
hours 4
chapters.
minutes and
Those are the
22 seconds.
chapters.
It's very painful to get to, and I can tell you that I would never use chapter
No,
markers
I
in this
would
app.
never find. I didn't even know it existed there. So there you go. See if you can click on the 0 hours and 4 minutes one. See if it'll flick
TX
forward.
1 hour 4 minutes and 14 seconds. 0 TXT 0 hours 13 minutes.
And the way they're
43
labeled
seconds.
isn't very good
Interview with
either.
Ben and Diego.
Unfortunately,
Strap. Tech
you
duration.
got
0
the
hours 43
time
minutes
first,
and
and
43
then it
seconds.
rambles on for a while.
TXT
And then next to it, we have a text something link
secondary action button.
and a secondary action button, whatever that is. Let's tap on it. I'm curious.
If you like, share, subscribe.
Oh,
and all
there you go.
that.
So that moves you.
And
0
having said
hours
all
13
that,
minutes and
we're about
43
to- We're about to discuss.
0 hours
we're about
50.
to go live with our demo.
So tapping on the 0, whatever it is, doesn't actually work.
0
Well, maybe
hours
it does.
13
Let me
minutes
see.
and 4.
No, I think
Nope,
you've got
it
to
doesn't
click on
work.
that secondary
TXTV
button.
link.
Yeah.
Let's see what that link thing does.
All right, guys.
No
well,
web browser
we
found.
have
No web browser found. I don't
Secondary
know why.
action.
That's kind of
like,
strange.
share, subscribe, and all that good bit. And having said all that,
All right.
So quite clearly, there
Pause.
needs to be a little bit of work done in that screen. But I think, like Podcast Static, for example, and this is one of the main things that I really, really want them to put in, is just put it in as a next button. Same as what they
Well,
do
it should
in
be
most
as a
other
next
ones.
button, or it should be right on the main page without having to switch to 2 pages to be able to get to it. And that switch page button, it doesn't even tell you that it's done anything, so you kind of have to explore the screen to see if once you hit switch page, did it actually do anything, which is kind of a problem. Anyway, we will be sending this feedback along to them, and of course, making sure that they know about this podcast and our feedback. And hopefully you'll send feedback along as well, and I'm sure that they'll get around to fixing this. But anyway, otherwise, it's a pretty nice app. Marco, what do you think?
I think it's an excellent. I think out of all the podcast apps that I've got, if they implemented a couple of those fixes which we talked about in the interview, I would definitely use it as my primary app. I've definitely still kept this up, and I think they would be fairly quick at updating bits and pieces like that. They seem to be very active on GiftHub and various other forums. So I would
They seem to
go
know
as a-
about accessibility standards.
Oh, absolutely.
Too, so.
They do care. So I definitely, if you haven't tried this app, give it a go and submit your feedback, because the more people that do it, the more likely it is to get fixed. So I do definitely think it's a great app, though, Nim.
That's right. All right, guys. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this midweek episode of the AntennaPod app interview and demo. And we'll see you guys later on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you, Nemo. We'll catch you on the weekend, people.
Yep. Goodbye.